Welcome to the John Ford UFO Nightmare, a dedicated ufologist's journey through hell and our attempt to get him out.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the John Ford UFO Nightmare, episode 23. Essentially, we could call this the 21st anniversary of John's incarceration and the start of his battle through hell right at the moment. So tonight we got a little bit of a skeleton crew, but we will be having more people join us here. I'm on the line here with Joe Sapardo. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hi, fine, thanks.
That's great. That's great. And then I have Jerry Samisi on tonight. And Jerry, glad to have you back.
Yes, it's always nice to be back.
Perfect. Now I'm going to hand it over to Jerry for those of you that don't know much about John Ford and his nightmare. Jerry's going to do a quick synopsis, and we're going to follow into some updates. Joe stays pretty close with what's going on, and we will be joined later by Rich Smith and Peter Moon. So everybody will be popping in here and out, but go ahead, Jerry, and let our listeners know, about the John Ford story.
All right. If you're new to the program, John Ford is a former court guard in first in Brooklyn, then in Riverhead. And in the late 80s, he started a group, the Long Island UFO Network. And my association with John was that I was working for a newspaper on the east end of Long Island. I heard about his group, and I wrote an article about it. And in the ensuing years, wrote a few articles about, events that John claimed were UFO sightings, UFO crashes, and which each of these is a story unto itself. But for the purpose of this, I'll just have to pass on that. And John kind of trusted me because, as many of you know who follow ufology, the mainstream press is getting better, but particularly back 20, 25 years ago would kind of treat it in a mocking way. And I think John appreciated it. I just wrote it straight without any judgment. So one day it was at the beginning of spring in 1996. I hadn't heard from John for a while. I gave him a call to see what was going on, and he sounded very, my first impression was, gee, this guy sounds paranoid. He was telling me that he lives in Brookhaven Township, which is the largest township on Long Island, and he said that politicians were out to get him. He was afraid of people trying to kill him. And as I said, my honest impression was this was like kind of crazy. But he said at the end of the phone call something that it happened to be very prophetic. He said, if something happens to me, you'll know what I said is true. 6 weeks later, it's the middle of June, 1996, and I'm watching the 6 o'clock news, literally, and I'm hearing suddenly UFO investigator from Long Island UFO investigator arrested, and I just knew, and there he was being let out of his house in handcuffs. And the charges were allegedly, these were the charges for him allegedly planning to do this, was to murder 3 Brookhaven town public officials with a radioactive substance by putting it in their toothpaste, putting it on car seats. And when I heard that, I thought, either this is the most ridiculous thing or John really is crazy. Because, I don't know, I said, what is he going to do, sneak in, crawl in somebody's bathroom and put, radium in their toothpaste? So, again, to make a longer story short, John, he had a lawyer named John Rouse, who was an attorney at the time, who later became highway superintendent in Brookhaven, is now a family court judge in Suffolk. And Rouse, from Mike, again, I was writing about this. I had conversations with John Rouse. He was all set to go to trial and blow all the lid off corruption in Suffolk County. And I should add that our township, which I live in also, Brookhaven Township, has a much-used nickname around here. It's called, instead of Brookhaven, it's called Crookhaven. We've had our share of corrupt officials and town workers. So anyway, Rouse is all set to go, battle the Suffolk County DA, John Caddison, and it seemingly at a twist at the last minute, he convinces John to, he convinces John to take the deal of not competent to stand trial, because he tells John at the most you'll go away for 2 or 3 years and you'll get out. And if John had gone to trial and been found guilty, he would have lost his pension from his job. Now, that 2 to 3 years turned out to be and again, this is June 11th, 2017. He was arrested on June 12th, 1996. So tomorrow he will have been incarcerated for 21 years. And there were 2 other alleged co-conspirators in this, guy named Joe Mazzucchelli and Joe Szabo, if I remember that correctly. Mazzucchelli actually served some time in jail, got out. Again, if John had, even if he had been convicted, he would have been out. So Joe could probably tell you now what convicted John was this. Mazzucchelli. I'm sorry. Did you say something, Joe?
I'm just agreeing. I mean, I'm listening to this, and I'm shaking my head. I'm looking at the calendar, and it was definitely June 12th, 1996,
yes, it was
around between 9 and 10 p.m.
I don't remember the exact time, but
it's a shame.
So,
it really is.
Apparently, John was a gun collector. He had a number of firearms in the house, which were all registered. They made a big deal when they raided his house that he had a lot of guns. They portrayed him as this because he had a publication called The Freeman, which was a long-established, I would say, a libertarian conservative publication. And at the time, there was some militia group called the Freemen, raising a ruckus somewhere in the West. And I think a lot of people mistook it. John Ford Guns, he's part of some wacky militia group. And as it turned out, it was just this magazine that he subscribed to. And all these guns were legal. Now, what happened is this guy, Mazzucchelli, that John had befriended and had done a lot of favors before stole one of John's guns and sold it. I don't know if he sold it directly to a police informant, but what happened is a police informant with a wire went over John's house with this guy Mazzucchelli. Mazzucchelli was, I would describe him as kind of a petty thief with visions of himself as an outlaw biker. One conversation I had with him, that's how he described himself. Mazzucchelli and this guy Koch or Koch, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, went over to John's, and they were joking around. I'm not sure how much Mazzucchelli egged him on. John was saying stuff like, "Oh, I'm going to put radium." John would secure radium to calibrate the Geiger counters he used when he went out on alleged UFO sites to see if there was any abnormal radiation in the area. Now, he was in possession of radium that had been illegally taken by this guy Szabo. Now, I'm not sure if John knew that at the time. Szabo worked for Grumman. It was a very, very small amount of radium. And as a matter of fact, when I spoke to the Brookhaven Radiological Response Team, whom the authorities called to John's house to get the radium, the guy said to me it would take like 20 years exposure to this to give somebody cancer. It's not something that they would take once or be exposed to once and die. In fact, the the PR person at the lab, Mona Rowe, told me the joke around the lab was that, oh, if you put this on somebody's car seat, you'll cure them of prostate cancer. So it was not something that was immediately toxic to somebody. So for him to use it as a weapon to take somebody out would seem ludicrous. Would just be ludicrous. But anyway, John Ford he made some joke about putting radium in Anthony Gazzola's lasagna. Gazzola was, a Brookhaven town official at the time. It'd be like if I said, I'm going to go to the White House and, put some rat poison in Trump's dinner, and then the FBI comes and arrests me. It's ridiculous. So based on that, they busted him with conspiracy for murder. And now another further, I don't know if the word is irony, but a telling point is that his three alleged victims, one John Powell at the time was head of the Suffolk County Republican Party, and he had risen through the ranks of Brookhaven officialdom. He started out working at the landfill, then he became the highway superintendent. That seems to be a stepping stone to a lot of great things in Brookhaven. But anyway, he was arrested for running, doing some illegal things, illegal dumping, running a chop shop, and he did time. And another Suffolk County legislator, Fred Towle, was also eventually busted on corruption charges. Gazzola was the only one who was not, found guilty of anything, though I've heard a lot of, stuff about him that I personally couldn't verify. I don't know if it's true, but so 2 out of his 3 victims apparently were crooked, which, seems more telling to me. But again, I kept thinking of him saying, if something happens to me, you'll know what I said is true. So I visited John. He was first in jail in Riverhead before they moved him upstate. He's been in a psychiatric prison, for a long time. I think he was in Riverhead through to the end of 90. He was arrested in June 96. He was in Riverhead probably to the end of 97. Because I remember seeing him there late summer, early autumn 97. I think it was a few months after that they shipped him up to Mid Hudson. Now, he has apparently had no incidents at Mid Hudson. He's not exhibited any violent tendencies. He keeps going up for release, and they keep keeping him. That's basically it. And again, there are a lot of different facets to this. I understand now. As far as I know, he's on his second attorney, Robert Reno. He was supposed to have a hearing a few months ago, and that got canceled because, and I believe Joe can fill people in on this better than I can. They wanted someone from Suffolk County to represent the, in other words, someone from Suffolk County, I guess, to say why he shouldn't be released, which I don't even know what even sense that makes. It does make
there's a whole bevy of information that they use to legal procedures and loopholes to keep John from even appearing in court between the beginning of November and now. We've done several shows, and there's been mix-ups and court dates and different affirmations and so forth. But the way it stood as of the beginning of November, he was supposed to have a trial on, I believe, November 15th or thereabouts. And that was delayed. In fact, I was on my way literally out the door to go up and testify on his behalf. And I was called up by John, who couldn't get in touch with the attorney, and found out that his court date was postponed with no other further information given. They then had it. Yeah, they had it. That was in November. Then on November 30th, that was the last date that the district attorney's office in Suffolk County was allowed to ask for an independent psychiatric review, somebody that they picked. They chose not to even address that, and the case was pushed off several more times. Once again till February, and then into April. And the reason it was pushed off in February and again in March and into April was allegedly because they decided that they wanted to have not just one but three different doctors examine John, in addition to his treatment team, which includes psychiatrists, psychologists, nursing staff, attendants, and so forth. So all these people against John and his lawyer and the psychologist, Dr. Greff, who we paid for an independent examination of John, and he's examined John on a number of occasions, and we pay for his examination and his results, written results and testimony to back up his results, whether or not he finds that John is fine or not. Okay, we pay for that. So they had their opportunity, and somehow they managed to get three different groups of, three different doctors outside the hospital. And then but by the time the case came to court, the window of opportunity for John contesting his continued retention for that 2-year period had already lapsed. So John is out of luck again until possibly as long as a year and a half from now. So we're faced with that situation.
But if he had a court date or a hearing date and it was postponed, how does that? How could they say he? It's as if they're saying, oh, he didn't apply for this hearing, so he can't apply for another 2 years.
That's exactly the question I've been asking his attorney. That's exactly the question that John has been asking his attorney, Mr. Reno, who's been on the show. Okay. And he's been paid, the doctor's been paid, so it's not a matter of, financial or anything like that. There's just no explanation suitable for John or for me or for anybody that's interested in this case. Now, you have to remember that John's behavior since he's been arrested, at his arrest and prior to his arrest, for 22 years in the court system in Brooklyn and in Riverhead as a court officer in the state Supreme Court, where he carried a gun every day, was exemplary. He had no recorded incidents of. He handled prisoners. He reported to state Supreme Court every working day with a loaded gun, handgun, in uniform. So we're not talking about some whack job. All right. Then, of course, all right, if he wants to collect weapons, he wants to go down to the shooting range, that's his prerogative. Nothing found in his house was found to be illegal, including the little chunk of radium. It was not radium metal, by the way. It was radium ore, which he procured independent from his friend Zabo, who did offer him as a container of it, but he never even looked at it. The problem is the radium that was in those large containers, which are in the videos on Richard Smith's website, they're metallic radium, and they're used in a machine that photographs airframes for F-14s. And when they're depleted, it's still metallic radium, but it doesn't glow in the dark or anything. There's only small amounts of it stored in a 20-pound lead container, tiny amount, several grams, usually in powdered form. That was taken out of his truck, which was parked in the street and unlocked. And John never had contact with that at all. He didn't even know it existed. So And they tried to pass another story off that John was parked in front of John Powell's house at some point.
What's this about him parked in front of Powell's house? What'd you say?
Joe.
Oh yeah,
Joe.
Yeah.
One second. Richard
Good.
Smith is with us too. Just wanted to let you know he popped in.
Hi, Rick. How you doing, man?
Hey guys, glad to see you here tonight. Yeah, it's good to be back on here with everyone.
Great to hear you.
So, yes,
let me
definitely.
just finish this one thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
I mean, you're looking at a 22-year history of John being employed by the court in Brooklyn and in Riverhead, State Supreme Court, and 21 years now in the hospital with no flight risk, no untoward behavior, absolutely no behavioral issues whatsoever. And this is somebody that they're accusing of wanting to murder people. I mean, here's a guy that wouldn't raise his voice, that would sue people rather than get into any type of altercation with them. And he still has that credibility. And they don't want him released strictly for financial reasons because he was incarcerated illegally. The arrest warrant was dated 2 days after his arrest.
That's another point.
There's a lot of problems with the case, and they are culpable for his illegal incarceration, and it'll be 21 years tomorrow. So on that note, on that somber note, I'll let anyone else add or correct me or whatever.
Joe, what happened?
Okay.
Joe, what happened to Mazzucchelli and Zabel? Well, we've had Mazzucchelli on here. Yeah, let our listeners know.
Okay, I know about Mazzucchelli was offered a plea deal when John was firmly going to contest this until he was told it was a political matter and that he was going to be found not guilty. His lawyer told him that and advised him to plead guilty by reason of insanity, non-compos mentis, and so forth. But Mazzucchelli was offered up until the time that John was, permanently committed. I believe that was around. It was being worked on up until about 2000, where he was finally settled in there because they kept sending him back. There was nothing wrong with him. They would interview him. He would answer every question to their satisfaction and saying there's nothing wrong with this guy. We can't take him up here. But Mazzucchelli, on the other hand, said if you sign this paper saying that you colluded with this guy with John Ford to commit murder, you can go, and you'll be on probation for 5 years, and you'll have to testify in court in front of a jury. And Joe Mazzucchelli would have nothing to do with it. He said, no. What's the standard minimum sentencing? I'll save you a trial. So they sentenced him to 12 years. I believe he served 5.5 to 6 years of the 12 years, and he was released on probation and had to report to a probation officer for another 5 years. And since then, he's been. He's basically just, gotten old and settled down and, stopped committing whatever the hell he was doing, stopped doing whatever the hell he was doing. That was the situation with Mazzucchelli. Szabo, on the other hand, they found out for certain that he had nothing to do with any of this. But he did have an unregistered firearm. And I believe he spent 6 months, or he was sentenced. I don't know if he spent time in jail, but he was sentenced to 6 months in county jail for having an unregistered firearm, a handgun. And I would imagine, since he was he was not an employee of Grumman, he was an employee of the Department of Defense, that he may have had, a weapon or two around the house for his own protection. And that was all they could get him on. He didn't have anything illegal, and he was not associated with John. They had no phone records. They had no conversations. They were not going to be able to get him for conspiracy. Now, when you talk about a conspiracy, you're looking at how many people, anybody that spoke out on his behalf was hassled to death, including me. Okay, Preston Nichols had to move out of state, actually upstate New York, in seclusion, and I understand his health is not very good now. He was one of the few people that spoke up in John's defense. Anybody else that even bothered to accept phone calls from, they were hassled to death. And it's getting to the point now where because of this being his 21st anniversary, there was another station on Friday, late Friday night, did a show similar to this, a podcast and so forth, and we had a number of guests lined up. It got completely botched. My voice was fed in out of phase. There was noise. There were cutouts. And I have a really, really good communication system set up over here. And right now, I've already lost, since I've been on the air, 2 of the 3 backup systems for my voice coming over and to be on this show. So you can kind of see where that's going. It was a politically motivated, pre-planned plot to put somebody, to find a scapegoat, to take attention away from toxic dumping, which included radioactive waste from the Grumman plant, which is now Northrop Grumman, I believe. And it was being run by the town of Brookhaven under the auspices of Gazzola and by Powell and Towell. Fred Powell and John Powell, both of whom served federal prison sentences for corruption, illegal toxic dumping, as John, was certain of, and a number of other offenses. In fact, Powell himself was the executive legislator in Suffolk County. Couldn't take a political post, but he still remained the chairman of the Republican Party in Suffolk County. And his children, at least one of them, were given special consideration for high-level jobs, appointed but not elected. So he died very mysteriously of a heart attack at the age of 52. I think 50. I'm pretty sure it was 52. And there's a story going on around about that, where they use digitalis to induce a heart attack and so forth. So there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And as far as John becoming overtly paranoid, he had damn good reason to. He asked me to monitor his cell phone communications because Joe Mazzucchelli had been using John's cell phone. And in 1996, not too many people had cell phones. Mm-hmm. John got that specifically for use for Long Island.
Joe, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello? Oh.
Yeah.
We lost you for a sec, but you're back.
Tell me you didn't lose me.
We lost you for a sec. Peter, guys, Peter Moon has joined the crew here, so.
Okay, you know what?
Hey,
let somebody else go on. I'm tired now. You guys ask me anything you like. I'm here.
As you guys are talking, I did a quick search on Mazzucchelli. I don't find anything. I'm finding all those old articles that came out, around when he was arrested, and I curiously, there was an article from the Washington Post called "Out There," and it came out early in 1998. And then, I remember this one in particular because I queried the Post about doing, a big article on John. And they said, well, maybe our magazine section might do it. And then I spoke to the editor there. And he said, it's too, because I said, I knew him. I'd written about him in the past. I'm in this area where he is. And the editor said, well, gee, it's too bad he didn't contact me, a month or so ago because I just assigned the story to somebody to do. And it was a young reporter. He called me up. He was, maybe his only fault was that he was just not familiar enough with the piece. As we are talking, I've got it up on my computer and I'm reading it. And I think, again, this is what a lot of people in, the UFO field, paranormal field, whatever it is, don't like about the media, is they'll just say, oh, gee, this is a weird story, and they'll just kind of frame it like this is a weird story without really getting into the depths of it. Just describing John Preston Nichols. One thing that kind of amuses me, that the reporter basically begins by saying Long Island is a weird place, and to make your mark doing something weird on Long Island, you got to be pretty weird. So he mentions all these weird things on Long Island, the Joey Buttafuoco case, Katie Beers. I don't know if your audience, that even registers without, but he goes on about the Southaven Park crash, the Murchis Bay incident. But again, it's just skimming over the surface. That's the problem. The problem with it. It kind of like just gives the reader, oh, gee, this is a nice weird story, but that's all it is a nice weird story. Okay, I'm sorry to interject, but that's. So I don't know if any of you have any of you ever read this article in the Washington Post?
Not the Post article.
Yes, I have. Yeah, in fact, I think I have it connected to the website too, because I had found it. It's under the same link there out there, and it didn't take a very a good slant to the whole thing from what I remember reading on it. In fact, I don't know. What was allowed to go through as far as it being filtered.
The average person spends hours a week at the grocery store, but you're not an average person, are you? There's a better way to get fresh groceries, and it's called Fresh Direct. Shop for just picked fruit and vegetables, custom cut meat and seafood, freshly made meals and meal kits, all your favorite brands, plus hundreds of weekly deals. Order Fresh Direct anytime, anywhere, and get the freshest groceries delivered to your door. Use code PLAYLIST to get $25 off your first order of $99 or more. Visit freshdirect.com or download the app today.
And what was allowed to be put out there, but
okay, that's another issue, because after John was arrested, I wrote a very long piece about it for the paper I work for in the Hamptons, and I did about what John Ford, like what had just happened, and also gave like a good background on it. And my editor wanted to really cut the whole thing in half. And hold on. Yeah, he's in. Strike your trial again. So I said to him at the time, well, if you cut this, there's really no sense in publishing it. I basically said, either put the whole thing in or don't use it, which was kind of nervy for me to do, but that he acquiesced to that finally. So, I think it was a pretty good piece. It gave a lot of information without going on the deep end about it.
No. It didn't show up in Newsday that way, unfortunately, and we know who owns Newsday, and we know who owns News 12 and Cablevision. It's the politicians, the same dirty people that corrupt, that are running the government. They're bilking Suffolk County residents and town residents in Smithtown and Brookhaven, for taxes that are probably the second highest, I believe, property taxes in the country. So where's this money going? There's no public transportation. There's no, the schools are in shambles. So the money's going somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's I always point out to people, I said, look, it's this is something that happened in the mid to late 90s, before anything with, any of the trouble that we have going on today, with the government finding any excuse to throw you in jail or arrest you or anything like that, or ship you off to secret unknown places and put a black bag over your head and all that. this was all in 1996, and
there's an interesting thing in this article that just came up. It said the district attorney at the time, James Cattison, who was vigorously pursuing this. Cattison was supported in his November re-election bid by Powell, who was one of Ford's alleged victims. And there's actually
amazing.
There's a good quote here by Rouse, Ford's attorney at the time. The DA makes it look like he saved the Republican leader's life. He blew this way out of proportion. But ultimately, I don't think Rouse served John Ford well. And I don't know what he might have. Did he feel that he was advising John Ford in the best way he could to accept that incompetent designation? I don't know. Okay. It says over here, Mazzucchelli was sentenced in November. That would have been November '97 to 3 to 9 years for conspiracy.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So
that sounds about right.
How many years did he serve?
5.
Oh, he did do 5.
5 years, and he had another 5 years on probation. And I don't know if you want to go back through the records and see what he has to say about that, but he was on one of the shows, one of these shows, and we got to question him. And it took him about 10 minutes to actually admit that he took guns from John's house, and which John's tried to give him the benefit of the doubt because he knew about one of the weapons. And he says, if it comes back within a day and it hasn't been fired, I won't call the police. And he was, at that point, prepared to throw Joe out of the house. Joe was living there, sleeping on his couch, eating his food, driving his cars. And Joe had him snowballed and convinced that he was needed, that Joe was needed by John for protection because there were other people interested in the work he was doing. And when Mazzucchelli is in his con artist mode, I'm certain that any reasonable person would, in the same situation, would believe it. You don't have to be crazy, all right? And John is certainly not then, and he's not now. So,
and you know what? I'm sorry that I keep referring to I guess because I was involved in this as a writer, as a reporter, and I'm noting this Post article said Ford declined to be interviewed, and in fact, none of the articles written, except the articles I wrote about John, had any quotes from him directly, and yet I have tried to place articles about him in various venues, and nobody's taken me on. I've queried News 12 about covering this, and since they certainly covered it at the time, I haven't, I said this guy's trying to get out. Well, they haven't seemed to pick up on this, but I don't know.
Right.
It shows it. I guess it's easy to say. Is it that there's a vast conspiracy specifically against him, or is it just endemic of a certain attitude in the media that we're just looking for the National Enquirer aspect of the story? We don't really want to know anything more than that. Then we'll move on to the next weird story.
I think a lot of it comes from just going back to what Joe said before, the economics of it. It's the economics drives the politics, which then drives the battle plan or the war. And then so behind the scenes, the economic aspect has already been decided on. By any means necessary, keep his ass in there so that the county doesn't have to be have to save face or be shamed in front of the public. Because it's one thing to have everybody who lives there say, yeah, Suffolk County sucks, but those are the people who live there. And of course, the attitude is, well, you live there, we're not going to listen to you. That's just your jaded opinion. That's not objective, which is a stupid way to think, because the first person you're going to go to get an honest opinion is the person who lives there. But so there's that attitude of, not actually officially recognizing Suffolk County as the political wackaloon monkey bin that it is. But to have John Ford get out, that changes the whole face of it, because then the reality sets in. Oh, this really happened to this guy. And now the economic reality, which can't be argued against, would settle in immediately, and everyone would now have to listen to the people living in Suffolk County and realize that you can't get around the John Ford argument, because that's a reality that slaps you in the face. But as long as they can keep him in there, then they can generate all the politics they want in terms of propaganda, to the point where silence is the best form of propaganda of all. And have this go quiet in the media across the board. And if it does crop up, well, the politics would be, let's make fun of it. And because that generates then the battle plan of how to destroy him, the war. So it's a string of events there. And in that house of cards, the one thing that would topple it immediately is, everybody knows on both sides of the equation, it would be releasing him. And that's why they're doing everything in their power to delay this over and over again, to find some damn excuse. It's the economics being the factor that's driving it, but the psychology being the bullshit argument that's used as the marketing to camouflage the economic argument. So this is where it's all coming from.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't it seem endemic in the nature of a lot of law enforcement? I mean, I'm sure all of us watched many of these true crime stories where they get some guy, he's the guilty one, and then 10 years later they find out he's not guilty. It's that, okay, we want to look good, we're the police, we're whoever we are, whatever agency it is. We caught the culprit, we're great, we get the criminal, and as they feel they've got their person, they don't want to listen to anything to the contrary. So John Ford is guilty, he's crazy, he's going to kill people with radium, and that's the end of the story. I think those no officials want to believe that, want to be shown up. That even goes, I think, beyond the politics and them.
Well, of course. I mean, this is that was. I mean, you could easily take John Ford's story and run a parallel to The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. Where it would take. See, that's the other driving factor too, the economics fueling the politics, because aside from the politics of making fun of it in the media or having complete media silence, newspaper, TV, radio, whatever, the flip side, the ugly side of that politics is that, just like in the movie The Fugitive, the last thing that Suffolk County wants is an outside agency of a higher power, be it the FBI or otherwise, poking their nose around. Because just like in the movie The Fugitive, the FBI had to take a more of an objective approach to realizing, just like John Ford, perfect behavior in there, not a psychopath, not slitting people's throats, okay? Couldn't harm a fly. Well, in the movie The Fugitive, the FBI team that was chasing Harrison Ford, the first question that came up was, why doesn't he shoot back at us? Why hasn't he done anything to harm us? Why is he always, hell-bent on being on the run? And just like with John Ford, who's hell-bent on pushing his truth, his story about what happened to him, The Fugitive is like, I'm on the run because I'm going to prove who actually killed my wife. Okay? The FBI was in a position to be objective enough to say, okay, because the FBI is very much into psychology, as opposed to the local Suffolk County Police Force, which, they're not exactly, they don't exactly carry a broad scope from a philosophical perspective of law enforcement. They're very black and white in their mentality, as was the case in the movie. The police were hell-bent on saying, no, we have our guy, he's guilty. And FBI said, no, you don't.
You had a situation in John's case where they did not want federal scrutiny of this at all.
Exactly.
All right,
Exactly.
so they picked the proper scapegoat. Here was some guy who had a registered not-for-profit organization to investigate UFOs, and he was involved with politics, and and right-wing politics, and he was a court employee. He had a gun. He had at least one gun. They knew that. I mean, because he had to work, right? And at this point, when you factor all that into it, okay, and then you have someone like John Mazzucchelli who's got a criminal background, but not a violent person, no violent behavior or anything like that. Maybe one felony arrest or something like that, or a felony conviction, never harming anyone. Building the whole thing up for an informant because he sold a gun to someone who got caught with it, and that guy flipped on him. Okay, now you have Powell and Gazzola and God knows who else going directly to the district attorney's office to point the investigation away from them and towards this crazy guy who believes in UFOs, who wants to off them with radium in their toothpaste. Okay, I mean, it took them a long time to get that sort of a statement. Okay, and you can tell it was jocular. Okay, they're not going to use the tape in court. They only use part of it, and the rest of it is printed out in transcript form. And if you read it, it's not convincing. It's not something actionable or convictable, but it's enough to get a grand jury just about anything is enough to get a grand jury indictment for the possibility of something like this happening. The thing is, they wanted to take the federal scrutiny off of these particular politicians because they were, in fact, doing criminal activities that were against federal statutes, not just state and local. But they were, they were running toxic waste dump, at least one, possibly two, three. They were doing illegal sand mining. Powell himself was supervising operation of a chop shop, selling vehicles to the county of Suffolk that were used, selling them as new vehicles and having the serial numbers altered. He was directly supervising this, and they proved this in a court of law. And he served federal prison time for it. So you go by, and the police weren't brought in on this until very, very late in the game, maybe less than a week before the actual arrest, which did not, again, have a warrant. The warrant was dated for the 14th of June, 1996, and he was arrested on the evening of the 12th. And you can tell by the two phone calls that immediately preceded the phone calls were automatically recorded and stored digitally on a computer in my home off of a cell tower. Anything coming from or going to that cell phone, the electronic serial number, and there's a way of switching it on so that it begins and ends recording when the call is first activated, placed or received, and ends when it's done. And so I not only have the recorded information in digital format, but I have the time codes and so forth. Why did they see a need to take their tape, which they recorded in analog format, and alter it to make it sound like John was doing this because of UFOs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Why did they bother to do that? They really wanted to nail the lid shut and not have it come loose at any time. And that's what leads me to believe that this was a concerted effort to draw attention from what they were doing onto something that would bring in headlines, because you have somebody that has guns. You have somebody he's associated with a known criminal, and he's a UFO freak. He's got, he just won the Triple Crown. Okay, he is the scapegoat. He is their perfect scapegoat. And of course, they knew he's running the UFO organization because he lectured at libraries, and it was registered in the state of New York. And he was involved in politics. So, anything to the contrary, disregarding the police activity, the police didn't just do what the district attorney tells them to do, okay? It's supposed to be the other way around, according to Ken Storch, who's usually on this show. Usually somebody gets a tip, they go to the district attorney's office. Well, what evidence do you have? Bring it to me. And when they can get his case together, the police are involved in it. In this case, it was just the opposite. The district attorney's office was running it. Patterson and Powell have a relationship, financial, social, and political relationship. And as did Fred Towell, as did Gazzola. So the whole thing ties together in such a nice little knot that they don't want it to go to court. They'll use any means necessary to keep it out of even mental health court, where you're limited in what you can produce and where you can produce it, and it's off of Long Island. It's in upstate New York. So I understand where you're coming from, that the link between the fugitive. Why isn't this guy doing this? Why isn't he doing that? Nobody's going to ask those questions if you provide enough circumstantial evidence and you own the news media to begin with. Understand?
Right. Of course, yeah.
Okay.
And then, that would be the sequence of events: the economics, the politics, and then the war. How do we defeat this guy?
And the potential lawsuit that's hanging over Suffolk County's head and hanging over the his alleged intended victims, because their families have money and power. And now John, if they find that in a court of law after a trial that he was illegally incarcerated and for the wrong reason, it only has to be proven by the preponderance of the evidence, not to a moral certainty. And he owns, he's good for hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits.
Right.
Okay. So
exactly.
there's that economic aspect of it too. Right.
Right.
Yep.
I don't know.
What is John Ford's attorney? What's his present, strategy? If he, what does he say is the next step to do?
As far as I know, he's just going to proceed along the lines of the mental health guidelines. Produce the doctor in a court in front of a judge, and when the judge doesn't accept the opinion of the doctor, John is allowed to file for a jury trial, and in that case, everything is open, everything comes out, and they're waiting for John to get older. I mean, he's going to turn 69 this year or 70. I don't even remember anymore. 69, I think, this year. I think they're waiting for him to die. And they consider him such a threat that he just recently, last week, as a matter of fact, this past week, he was scheduled to go for, he had colorectal cancer while he was in there.
I was just going to ask, what exactly is the state of his health right now?
All right. Well, he had to go for colonoscopy, where they knock you out and look up there and take samples and test it to make sure it's not there's no cancer. So the day before, when he had to prepare for it, where it means you have to take laxatives and be sequestered and so forth, he was not allowed to tell anybody that he was going for this. He couldn't make a call. I didn't hear from him for 4 days. I got really, really worried, because he usually calls me every other day at least. And I didn't hear him from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Thursday, I was getting ready to pick up the phone. I said, well, I'll give it till tomorrow. Friday afternoon, I heard from him, and he told me what happened. He said that they feel that he has so many supporters out there that we may do something if we knew that he was going to be off of the premises, to spring him perhaps, or something to that effect, and that he was considered, he himself wasn't considered a flight risk, that we as his supporters are considered some type of I don't know what you would call it, just because we're his supporters, that we're going to go out of our way to do something illegal, and he can't let anybody know that he's going to be off of the premises of a psychiatric hospital. So go figure that out. This really happened.
Is that your conclusion is, or has actually somebody told you that?
John told me that. That's what they told John, his treatment team, members of his treatment team, doctors, nurses, attendants, told him that that's why he was not allowed to make any phone calls. All right, because he had to go for the colonoscopy. He was going to be off of the hospital grounds, and they didn't want anybody on the outside to know that he was going to be off of the hospital grounds.
Gentlemen, let's
figure that.
Gentlemen, let's take a break. I know, Joe, you've had a rough weekend, but we're going to take a break here. You're listening to John Ford UFO Nightmare on Inception Radio Network, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the John Ford UFO Nightmare, episode 23, essentially the 21st anniversary of John's long journey through hell. Tonight we have on Joe Sapardo, Jerry Samisi, and Richard Smith as our brain trust, and we are getting into what's going on with John, and he's pretty roadblocked right now, gentlemen, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he is.
Horribly,
yes, he is.
Horribly.
And they keep running him into these vicious circles like a dog chasing his tail, because at this point they've gotten away with. Is it this month? That's the 21st anniversary, or next month? It's this month, right?
Tomorrow.
It is.
Yeah.
This month.
Okay.
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Okay.
Tomorrow,
Right.
21st anniversary.
Right. June 12th. I can't believe. And these people, being as sadistic as they are, I'm sure the attitude at this point is, well, we've gotten away with 21 years. Let's see how far we can stretch this out by causing all forms of ridiculous contradictions in the court system to just have John, up and die, which is a horrible thing to say at his expense, but that's the twisted reality of it. And nobody wants to think that way. It's like, people are not that, mean and horrible. Well, yes, they are. When you're motivated by the economics of greed and profit and, patronage, political patronage and so forth, it's real easy to saunter down that path. And, after 20 years, all of a sudden your soul is as black as the pavement on the road. For all the things you've invested in, it's no different than the way a loan shark would drag you into this, a perpetual circle of debt. Well, it's a perpetual circle of deep pockets and deep dark circles of favors, to the point where to get rid of this favor, you have to do that favor, and it just keeps going from there. And I'm not making excuses to try and paint a picture of forgiveness and mercy for these scumbags, but they knowingly made their own decision and made their own bed, and they're going to have to sleep in it now, because so many overlapping sins have been committed here against John to keep him in there, and so at this point, the ultimate and final solution is, from their perspective, let him rot and die before we let him out. And based on the way his health is,
they had better hope that nothing.
Yeah,
they had better hope nothing happens to him, because I have full power of attorney and it extends beyond death, and I can go in and sue. Okay, based on my knowledge and his statements. Okay, I can go in and sue, file a tort action on his behalf, and multiple tort actions. Yeah. All right. Now that's not going to help John, but that is not going to help John. But the thing is, what we want to do is we want to help John. We want to get him the hell out of there very quickly. And we've been doing this for 2 years now.
Yes, 2 years. 2 years
getting a
next
little
month. Yep.
Wobbled.
Mm-hmm. Has there?
Yeah, it's been a fast 3 years since we started doing this. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any,
and
gentlemen? Is there any news on getting a new lawyer? I mean, is there anything going on with that, Joe?
Yeah. As soon as Robert Reno is finished with his part in this, and he's all caught up and paid for and so forth, it looks like we're going to have to get some heavy hitter in there very, very quickly, unless Reno really turns around quick, and starts doing right by John, because we had him on this show saying that it was going to take. I believe it was 2015 we had him on the show. That if we go to the federal jurisdiction or writ of habeas corpus, that could take years. Well, it's taking years, and he's just using the limited resources and limited bounds of mental health law in New York State, and he has gotten nowhere with these people. And at this point, they've been retracting, from what I understand, legally. John originally, when he went to trial, he was supposed to be get exculpatory evidence or have access to all the evidence that they had against him. And it turns out that they've been funneling information from the district attorney's office regarding recordings, saying that John said on tape that Joe Mazzucchelli should put that gun to good use and use it on Gazzola. And it turns out that when he inquired about it, they wouldn't give him the document. But when he inquired about it, they said they had made a mistake, that it was Joe Mazzucchelli talking to the gentleman who worked for the district attorney's office, that guy Koch, who was in the room that night, who was stirring up all these issues and getting people to say things that they ordinarily would not have said. And you have to look at it also from the vantage point of you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your own home. And John was in his own home. He wasn't doing anything illegal. He was sitting at his typewriter. Okay? This guy's doing all the talking. Mazzucchelli is backing him up.
The average person spends hours a week at the grocery store, but you're not an average person, are you? There's a better way to get fresh groceries, and it's called Fresh Direct. Shop for just picked fruit and vegetables, custom cut meat and seafood, freshly made meals and meal kits, all your favorite brands, plus hundreds of weekly deals. Order Fresh Direct anytime, anywhere, and get the freshest groceries delivered to your door. Use code PLAYLIST to get $25 off your first order of $99 or more. Visit freshdirect.com or download the app today.
Okay, his friend is spinning around waiting to find out if he's going to get arrested for possession of a firearm again. Okay, Arthur Riva, we discussed him on another show. Okay, he's the informant, and he introduces Mazzucchelli to an assistant district attorney who is interested in UFOs and wants to buy radium, wants to buy guns, all this other kind of stuff. John is telling him, back off, enough with this, leave it alone. And you don't hear that part. As far as attorneys go, Reno is I guess he knows what he's doing. He's gotten people out before, some alive, some after contracting cancer and dying 3 months later, but he is an expert in mental health law, and he practices in several states. When we can't pay him anymore, we're going to try to get somebody better, possibly pro bono. But right now, John is seriously looking into that. So that's the update on that.
We had, here's what I was a little confused about. We had Robert Reno on the show just last year. And I think it was in late summer, early fall. Okay? And it was around, it was either before or after the Joe Mazzucchelli interview. And he had said, unless I'm remembering things differently, I remember Robert Reno saying, don't worry about this. We're going to have him out by the beginning of the new year, being this year, 2017, January or February. And that started to look promising, but I haven't had a chance to get any phone calls or updates from John or anything like that. So what exactly has stalled out with Robert Reno from the enthusiasm he had only last year?
Right.
This is the part that I'm not understanding.
Well,
Joe, have you had any conversations with him?
Yeah, I think you're a little bit off on the dates. I think we started this show. It's a monthly show, so it had to be 2 years ago. I believe he was on in December or January. I'm not positive about that, but
16.
But he was going to have John out. I don't know if you have a log or you have the information, but he was on this show. His audio was not very good, and he was very gung-ho, and he even stated categorically that if he and John were walking down the street in New York City, that people would look at him 3 times even though they looked at John once, right? That he was level-headed, saying he believed John, he believed the story, and that the quickest way out of this was to go through the mental health system. But he did over this past summer, in 2016, he contracted I believe cancer, a skin cancer, and he was out for a couple of months. So giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm hoping that he's going to redeem himself when the time comes. And I don't know when that's going to be, because John has yet to be able to get in touch with him for a complete rundown on the situation, or get any kind of a complete description. The only thing that he is interested in now is the fact that the district attorney's office has been feeding information to John's treatment team, and this is information. It's privileged information. John can't get copies of it. They refuse to give John copies of it. They refuse to give his lawyer copies of it. He wants all the information that's been sent from the district attorney's office to the hospital, and given to members of the treatment teams that he's had over the years, over the past 21 years. I can imagine he's had a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, a lot of different attendants come and go, but he's working, with half of. He's telling them the same story, and they're getting challenging information from the district attorney's office as to why he should continue to be retained in a psychiatric institute. And it's getting to the point of absurdity right now. Until I hear from John's lawyer directly, I really don't know what's going on. Okay, I can only speculate that he's going to get back on track. He's been paid. The doctor that's going to be testifying on John's behalf has been paid. And it's just a matter of when is it going to go to court? What are the legalities of the mental health legal system, where you have to prove that you're sane, rather than getting a trial by a jury of your peers to find out whether or not you committed a crime. There was no crime committed here, okay? There was no factual crime. Nobody got hurt. Nobody even got, this is ridiculous. All right, now we're talking 21 years of illegal incarceration. They didn't even have a warrant. All right, they had no. Right. Even if they did have a warrant, they didn't have a warrant to search his truck. It was parked in the street and it was unlocked, and that's where the radium was found, and it was properly contained. It was depleted. Okay, and it was harmless. Okay, so the whole thing is it's a non-case. And why they're keeping him in there is financial. Richard, you hit it right on the head before. And as far as legal remedies, we're very limited at this point, as far as I know.
Well, if I were in John's place at this point, since I've met with continuing frustration trying to do this through the, shall we say, the procedures of the mental health system, I would just initiate a lawsuit right now. I mean, we had discussed this before. Where then it would seem like, well, he just trying to get out, where is if he gets out and then does a lawsuit, he has more leverage. But it seems to me, to use a cliche, the rug keeps getting pulled out from under him. And what I would see, what do I have to lose? Let me just start a lawsuit right now. That all these things, Now I guess he can't bring in stuff like about the. I don't know. He could start. Is he start a lawsuit against Suffolk County? Just going on the warrant. That whole warrant thing. That always bothered me too. When I brought that up to Rouse, Preston Nichols brought me a copy of that warrant one night when I was at the newspaper. I called
Okay,
Rouse
so I'm not bullying. I'm not giving anybody a line of bull on this. They didn't even have a warrant on the 12th.
I saw that warrant too, and I said to Rouse, I said, why don't you contest this? And this is Rouse's answer, and I don't know if it's an accurate answer or not. He said, what would happen is the prosecution would simply have the detective, whoever the one who was ever the one in the police department who brought that to the judge to sign, and he would testify that this was typographical error, and the judge would say, okay, you testifying under oath, this was really supposed to be dated the 12th, but it was just typed up as the 14th, and that's what Rouse said. And so that's not going to do anything. I don't know about that, because that's like saying
on that point, I would have to say Rouse is a liar on that point. Okay. Because there's no way they couldn't have gotten a warrant without the recordings, and they didn't have time to properly make the recordings and present them to the judge, where there was such intensity after they were modified, right? Where a statement is made. Why does he want to kill this guy Powell and so forth? Okay. He doesn't say that until the altered recording, all right? And that was made at 8:20 p.m. They were at his house at 9 p.m.
Well,
how did they get a judge to sign it on a Tuesday night
that's a very good point.
after 8 o'clock?
As far as I know, the authorities are only allowed to burst in if they feel someone's life is in immediate danger. Now, I've seen on TV cases where person A is soliciting an undercover officer to kill somebody, and the first time he or she says that to the undercover officer, he doesn't just he makes sure he has the whole case where, okay, you sure? He asks her, you meet her. In other words, there's a process. If there's no immediate threat of violence, the authorities can't do anything without a warrant. That's an excellent point. That if they made this action on the basis of those tapes, they could not have gotten a warrant on that day. And obviously they didn't. And yet they acted on that day as if they had a warrant. And I think that's a major legal point.
Yeah.
I mean, just that alone is the basis of in other words, it seems to me cases have been thrown out of court for a lot less, for technicalities. It seems like a huge technicality.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you can get a case thrown out in Suffolk County if you have the right amount of money. And in fact, I know for a fact you can. Okay, and we've discussed this. I'm not going to get back into it. People can go through the old shows. You can buy a judgeship if you have enough money. You can be appointed a judge. All right, in Suffolk County. That
apparently is true in a lot of counties in New York City. I know that's a real corrupt factor in our system. This whole judgeship thing. So you go to a trial and the judge has your fate in his hands unless you're in a jury trial. It's a very ominous thing to me, anyway. I don't know.
Well, judges have become politicians in robes. You've got by example, you've got the Supreme Court of the United States becoming nothing more than politicians in robes. There's no objective view of the law at that level. Well, at that level, at the highest level, if they're the ones setting the example, then all of the district courts and county courts trickling down from that system, they're going to see that and figure, well, I can do that too. and all of a sudden it becomes a political bench instead of a judicial bench. And therein lies the downfall right there, because you'd have to ask yourself, well, how often would Suffolk County Police be allowed to botch up the date of a search warrant? I mean, how often is this happening to the point where we can get away with saying typographical error? Okay.
And Richard, it was not the Suffolk County Police that came to get the warrant. It was the district attorney's office. Okay.
District attorney, right?
Right. The district attorney's office was a special investigative squad that was set up specifically to target John Ford and Long Island UFO Network and any associates of John Ford. Okay. And they, it normally goes the other way, as Ken will. He's even stated on other shows when he was in law enforcement, he would have to bring a narcotic case to the district attorney and justify it. Why it's worth doing this, and what evidence we have, what's irrefutable, etc. And the judge would sign a warrant, and he would make him or somebody else would make the arrest. But in this case, you have it running through from the politician through the head of the district attorney, the head district attorney, Catterson, all right, down through a special office, and then the police are brought in the last 3 to 5 days before to say to surround this place and arrest this guy and this guy when you go in there. And I'm sure if News 12 and the other camera crews and Newsday hadn't arrived before the police, that John would have been assassinated that night, because his dogs were beaten. Joe was pretty badly beaten up. Joe Mazzucchelli was pretty badly beaten up. If you see any pictures of him, several days later, he still has welts on his face and so forth. And John has 2 black eyes.
Beaten by the police.
Oh yeah. The police were beating his dogs and trying to get him to confess to plot to making. John really had no idea what he was being arrested for. Mm-hmm. Okay, at the point that he was arrested, he told me I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't even sure if these guys were cops, other than they were wearing uniforms. And the guy that they were talking to, Koch, walked out, and Mazzucchelli was walking with them, and the police came in force, knocked Mazzucchelli over a railing, just outside the door, and proceeded to pummel him. They were beating John's dogs up with nightsticks. All right, John will tell you this himself. All right, he had two I guess wire-haired terrier, I believe they were, and the Suffolk County Police were beating them and punching John while he's handcuffed behind his back and on his knees in his living room in his own house. So, if anybody's really interested in this, it could happen to you. All right. I just want to get that out because, people have not been coughing up $5 or $10 to the legal defense fund. And where, John is going to walk out of there penniless for a short time after we get through with all legal fees and court costs and psychiatric testimony and all that. So, that's kind of the purpose of the show, too. Right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I do want to say thank you to everybody who has been making donations, okay, to the John Ford Initiative there, because I was just, as you were bringing it up, I've been putting the links for the donation into the chat room there. And anyone out there listening to the show, you can go right to the website. It's just go to johnford.ufoteacher.com. And right on the left side, you'll see a PayPal donation link. You can just click on that. Any amount helps. If you're the kind of person who can only do $5, hey, that's $5 more that we didn't have.
Right.
If you're the kind of person who can lay down 500 or 5,000, do that too. All right. So every little bit counts. And it is extremely appreciated for those of you who have been doing it. Because I've been paying attention to that. And so, yeah, thank you very much to everybody who has been doing it there, all right? It is
Yeah, that's
much
awesome.
appreciated.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, it's been great. It's been a great show. Like I said, these little shows are sometimes the best. We had some great insight tonight from Richard Smith, Sherry Samizi, and Joe Zapardo. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on the show. Our next show will be Sunday, July 9th, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Inception Radio Network. We'll talk to you soon, and everybody, just keep John in your prayers, and you just never know, but let's get him free, people. Thanks for listening, and say good night, gentlemen.
Have a good night there.
Thanks for having us.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
The average person spends hours a week at the grocery store, but you're not an average person, are you? There's a better way to get fresh groceries, and it's called Fresh Direct. Shop for just picked fruit and vegetables, custom cut meat and seafood, freshly made meals and meal kits, all your favorite brands, plus hundreds of weekly deals. Order Fresh Direct anytime, anywhere, and get the freshest groceries delivered to your door. Use code PLAYLIST to get $25 off your first order of $99 or more. Visit freshdirect.com or download